The story of Chang To-RYONG Taoism has been a significant religion in Korea. Its main philosophy is captured in the phrase Susi Myon Song, meaning to correct the mind and reform the nature. In contrast, Buddhism emphasizes Myong Sim Kyon Song, or to enlighten the heart and see the soul. Taoists aspire for eternal life, known as Chang Sang Pulsa, while Buddhists seek to transcend the physical existence. Within the Taoist cosmology, there are three realms of genii: the upper genii, who dwell with God; the midway genii, who interact with angels and spirits; and the lower genii, who inhabit sacred earthly places, such as hills. The story of Chang To-RYONG is set within this framework. During the reign of King Cheung 1507 to 1526, a beggar named Chang To-RYONG lived in Seoul. He was around 40 years old, with an unattractive and perpetually dirty face. Despite his age, he wore his hair down his back like a young boy and carried a bag over his shoulder as he wandered the streets begging. His routine took him to various parts of the city during the day, and at night he would sleep near someone's gate. Chang was often seen in Cheongno, Bell Street, mingling with the servants and lower-class workers of the wealthy. They enjoyed his company, sharing jokes and light-hearted conversations. Although he lived as a beggar, he claimed his name was Chang, and thus people called him Chang To-RYONG, where To-RYONG signifies an unmarried young man from a noble family. One notable figure during this time was Chon Uchi, a magician renowned for his pride and arrogance. Whenever Chon encountered Chang on the street, he would dismount and prostrate himself with great humility. He not only bowed but appeared deeply fearful of Chang, unable to meet his gaze. Chang's casual greeting, "Well, how goes it with you, eh?" was met with Chon's respectful response, "Very well, sir. Thank you. Very well," and Chon displayed visible fear in Chang's presence. Sometimes Chang would completely ignore Chon's respectful bows, walking past without acknowledgement. Witnesses of these interactions were puzzled and sought an explanation from Chon. Chon explained, "There are only 3 spirit men currently in Chosen. The greatest is Chang To-RYONG, the second is PUK-CHANG, and the third is Yoon Se-pyong. People are unaware of this, but I know it. Therefore, I must show him reverence." Given Chon's own mysterious reputation, people largely dismissed his claims. In Seoul, there was a literary undergraduate whose house bordered the street. He often saw Chang begging and one day asked about his background. Chang revealed, "I come from a cultured family in Chula province, but my parents died of typhus fever, leaving me without relatives or home. I have no skills in any trade and am illiterate in Chinese letters, so I resort to begging." Moved by Chang's story, the undergraduate offered him food and hospitality. From that day, whenever there was a celebration at his home, he invited Chang to partake. One day, the undergraduate on his way to work saw a corpse being carried towards the water gate. Recognizing the body as Chang To-RYONG's, he felt a deep sorrow and returned home, lamenting, "There are many unfortunate souls in this world, but who has ever seen one as wretched as poor Chang?" For 15 years, he begged in Bell Street, and now he leaves the city as a lifeless body. 20 years and more afterward, the master had to make a journey through South Chula province. As he was passing Chi-i Mountain, he lost his way and got into a maze among the hills. The day began to wane, and he could neither return nor go forward. He saw a narrow footpath, such as woodmen take, and turned into it to see if it led to any habitation. As he went along, there were rocks and deep ravines. Little by little, as he advanced farther, the scene changed and seemed to become strangely transfigured. The farther he went, the more wonderful it became. After he had gone some miles, he discovered himself to be in another world entirely, no longer a world of earth and dust. He saw someone coming toward him dressed in ethereal green, mounted and carrying a shade with servants accompanying. The figure seemed to sweep toward him with swiftness and without effort. He thought to himself, "Here is some high lord or other coming to meet me, but," he added, "how among these deeps and solitudes could a gentleman come riding so?" He led his horse aside and tried to withdraw into one of the groves by the side of the way, but before he could think to turn, the man had reached him. The mysterious stranger lifted his 2 hands in salutation and inquired respectfully as to how he had been all this time. The master was speechless and so astonished that he could make no reply, but the stranger smilingly said, "My house is quite near here. Come with me and rest." He turned and, leading the way, seemed to glide and not to walk, while the master followed. At last, they reached the place indicated. He suddenly saw before him great palace halls filling whole squares of space. Beautiful buildings they were, richly ornamented. Before the door, attendants in official robes awaited them. They bowed to the master and led him into the hall. After passing a number of gorgeous palace-like rooms, he arrived at a special one and ascended to the upper story, where he met a very wonderful person. He was dressed in shining garments, and the servants that waited on him were exceedingly fair. There were, too, children about, so exquisitely beautiful that it seemed none other than a celestial palace. The master, alarmed at finding himself in such a place, hurried forward and made a low obeisance, not daring to lift his eyes. But the host smiled upon him, raised his hands, and asked, "Do you not know me? Look now." Lifting his eyes, he then saw that it was the same person who'd come riding out to meet him, but he could not tell who he was. "I see you," said he, "but as to who you are, I cannot tell." The kingly host then said, "I am TO-RYONG. Do you not know me?" Then, as the master looked more closely at him, he could see the same features. The outlines of the face were there, but all the imperfections had gone, and only beauty remained. So wonderful was it that he was quite overcome. A great feast was prepared, and the honored guest was entertained. Such food, too, was placed before him as was never everything on earth. Angelic beings played on beautiful instruments and danced as no mortal eye ever looked upon. Their faces, too, were like pearls and precious stones. TO-RYONG said to his guest, "There are 4 famous mountains in Korea in which the genie reside. This hill is one. In days gone by, for a fault of mine, I was exiled to earth, and in the time of my exile, you treated me with marked kindness, a favor that I have never forgotten. When you saw my body, your pity went out to me. This, too, I remember. I was not dead then, it was simply that my days of exile were ended, and I was returning home. I knew that you were passing this hill, and I desired to meet you, and to thank you for all your kindness. Your treatment of me in another world is sufficient to bring about our meeting in this one." And so they met and feasted in joy and great delight. When night descended, he was guided to a special pavilion where he would rest. The windows, adorned with jade and precious stones, emitted a soft, continuous glow, banishing the darkness. "I felt completely refreshed," he recounted. "My body rested, though sleep seemed unnecessary." At daybreak, another lavish feast awaited, followed by farewells. Chang advised, "This isn't your place to linger. You must depart. Our paths of genii and worldly men diverge. It may prove difficult for us to meet again. Take care and go in peace." With that, a servant was summoned to lead him out. Chang bowed respectfully and withdrew. Shortly after leaving, he found himself back in the mundane world, marked only by the planted stake where he exited. The servant vanished without a trace. The following year, the master attempted to return to the genii citadel, but found only treacherous mountains and impassable ravines. Its location remained elusive. As time passed, the master's spirit seemed to rejuvenate. At 90, he passed peacefully. During Chang's 15 years on Earth, he reflected, "I noticed only one peculiarity. His face never aged, and his clothing remained perpetually dirty yet unchanged in appearance. Our mortal eyes could not comprehend such strangeness." Imbang. A story of the Fox Orientals believe in the longevity and spiritual evolution of certain creatures like the tortoise, deer, crane, and fox. While these animals do not become angels or spiritual beings like humans, they supposedly undergo various transformations and can appear in different forms on Earth. Yi Kwai, son of a minister, achieved high office after passing his examinations. During his father's tenure as governor of Pyongan province, Kwai, then a young boy, often accompanied him. In the absence of his father, Kwai stayed at the yamen with his stepmother. Near the official quarters, there was a pavilion known as the Hill Pagoda, connected by a narrow gateway to the main hall. Kwai would sometimes study there with a yamen boy. One late night, after his companion had left, Kwai was surprised when a young woman suddenly entered the pavilion. She was neatly dressed and very attractive, but Kwai did not recognize her. She remained silent in a corner of the room, smiling mysteriously when he questioned her identity. As Kwai tried to engage with her, she knelt before him, and he, suspecting she might be a goblin or a fox spirit, decided to act. He swiftly carried her out into the yamen quarters, shouting for his stepmother and the servants to come. However, it was midnight, and everyone was asleep. No one responded to his calls. Realizing his mistake too late, Kwai felt a sharp bite on his neck from the woman on his back, confirming his suspicion that she was indeed a fox. Unable to bear the pain, he loosened his grip, and she escaped into the night, never to be seen again. It was a missed opportunity for Kwai, as no one came to his aid to capture the elusive fox spirit. CHEUNG PUK-CHANG, the Seer. The Yol-ryok Kiwisul, one of Korea's noted histories, says of CHEUNG PUK-CHANG that he was pure in purpose and without selfish ambition. He was superior to all others in his marvelous gifts. For him to read a book once was to know it by heart. There was nothing that he could not understand: astronomy, geology, music, medicine, mathematics, fortune-telling, and Chinese characters, which he knew by intuition and not from study. He followed his father in the train of the envoy to Peking, and there talked to all the strange peoples whom he met without any preparation. They all wondered at him and called him the mystery. He knew, too, the meaning of the calls of birds and beasts, and while he lived in the mountains, he could see and tell what people were doing in the distant valley, indicating what was going on in each house, which, upon investigation, was found in each case to be true. He was a Taoist and received strange revelations. While in Peking, there met him envoys from the court of Luchu, who also were prophets. While in their own country, they had studied the horoscope, and on going into China, knew that they were to meet a holy man. As they went on their way, they asked concerning this mysterious being, and at last reached Peking. Inquiring, they went from one envoy's station to another, till they met CHEUNG PUK-CHANG, when a great fear came upon them, and they fell prostrate to the earth. They took from their baggage a little book inscribed, "In such a year, on such a day, at such an hour, in such a place, you shall meet a holy man." "If this does not mean your excellency," said they, "whom can it mean?" They asked that he would teach them the sacred book of changes, and he responded by teaching it in their own language. At that time, the various envoys, hearing of this, contended with each other as to who should first see the marvelous stranger, and he spoke to each in his own tongue. They all, greatly amazed, said, "He is indeed a man of God." Someone asked him, saying, "There are those who understand the sounds of birds and beasts, but foreign languages have to be learned to be known. How can you speak them without study?" PUK-CHANG replied, "I do not know them from having learned them, but know them unconsciously." PUK-CHANG was acquainted with the three religions, but he considered Confucianism as the first. "Its writings as handed down," said he, "teach us filial piety and reverence. The learning of the sages deals with relationships among men and not with spiritual mysteries, but Taoism and Buddhism deal with the examination of the soul and the heart, and so with things above and not with things on the earth. This is the difference." At 32 years of age, he matriculated, but had no interest in further literary study. He became instead an official teacher of medicine, astrology, and mathematics. He was a fine whistler, we are told, and once when he had climbed to the highest peak of the Diamond Mountains and there whistled, the echoes resounded through the hills, and the priests were startled and wondered whose flute was playing. There is a term in Korea which reads Hian Pang Kwang, spiritual eye distant vision, the seeing of things in the distance. This pertains to both Taoists and Buddhists. It is said that when the student reaches a certain stage in his progress, the soft part of the head returns to the primal thinness that is seen in the child, to rise and fall when it breathes. From this part of the head go forth 5 rays of light that shoot out and up more and more as the student advances in the spiritual way. As far as they extend, so is the spiritual vision perfected, until at last a Korean sufficiently advanced could sit and say, "In London today, such and such a great affair is taking place." For example, So Wat Tam, who was a Taoist sage, once was seen to laugh to himself as he sat with closed eyes, and when asked why he laughed, said, "Just now in the monastery of Ha-in, 300 miles distant, there is a great feast going on. The priest stirring the huge kettle of bean gruel has tumbled in, but the others do not know this and are eating the soup." News came from the monastery later on that proved that what the sage had seen was actually true. The history of Confucius, too, deals with this when it tells of his going with his disciple Anja, and looking off from the Tai mountains of Shantung toward the kingdom of An. Confucius asked Anja if he could see anything, and Anja replied, "I see white horses tied at the gates of An." Confucius said, No, your vision is imperfect. Desist from looking. They are not white horses, but are rolls of white silk hung out for bleaching. The story. The master, PUK-CHANG, was a noted Korean. From the time of his birth, he was a wonderful mystery. In reading a book, if he but glanced through it, he could recall it word for word. Without any special study, he became a master of astronomy, geology, medicine, fortune-telling, music, mathematics, and geomancy, and so truly a specialist was he that he knew them all. He was thoroughly versed also in the three great religions, Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism. He talked constantly of what other people could not possibly comprehend. He understood the sounds of the birds, the voices of nature, and much else. He accompanied his father in his boyhood days when he went as envoy to Peking. At that time, strange barbarian peoples used also to come and pay their tribute. PUK-CHANG picked up acquaintance with them on the way. Hearing their language but once, he was readily able to communicate with them. His own countrymen who accompanied him were not the only ones astonished, nor the Chinamen themselves, but the barbarians as well. There are numerous interesting stories hinted at in the history of PUK-CHANG, but few suitable records were made of them, and so many are lost. There is one, however, that I recall that comes to me through trustworthy witnesses. PUK-CHANG, on a certain day, went to visit his paternal aunt. She asked him to be seated, and as they talked together, said to him, "I had some harvesting to do in Yeongnam County, and sent a servant to see to it. His return is overdue, and yet he does not come. I am afraid he has fallen in with thieves, or chanced on a fire or some other misfortune." PUK-CHANG replied, "Shall I tell you how it goes with him, and how far he has come on the way?" She laughed, saying, "Do you mean to joke about it?" PUK-CHANG, from where he was sitting, looked off apparently to the far south, and at last said to his aunt, "He is just now crossing the hill called Bird Pass in Munkyong County, Gyeongsang Province. Hallo, he is getting a beating just now from a passing Yangban gentleman, but I see it is his own fault, so you need not trouble about him." The aunt laughed and asked, "Why should he be beaten? What's the reason, pray?" PUK-CHANG replied, "It seems this official was eating his dinner at the top of the hill when your servant rode by him without dismounting. The gentleman was naturally very angry, and had his servants arrest your man, pull him from his horse, and beat him over the face with their rough straw shoes." The aunt could not believe it true, but treated the matter as a joke, and yet PUK-CHANG did not seem to be joking. Interested and curious, she made a note of the day on the wall after PUK-CHANG had taken his departure, and when the servant returned, she asked him what day he had come over Bird Pass, and it proved to be the day recorded. She added also, "Did you get into trouble with a Yangban there when you came by?" The servant gave a startled look and asked, "How do you know?" He then told all that had happened to him, and it was just as PUK-CHANG had given it even to the smallest detail. Imbang.